having illicit affairs with superiors, shouting racial profanities, assaulting a pregnant woman.
Hey, I punched you in the face a couple times.
The way some female officers behave when dealing with citizens or suspects is really outrageous. There have been numerous cases where female cops have been caught for their troubling behavior, both with the public and with other officers in their department. In today's video, we're going to see times when female cops got fired. Number 1. Carol Shea. There is a tendency for things to get quite raunchy in police departments, particularly when it comes to female officers. Back in 1995, Carol Shea of the New York Police Department ended up doing something that was super lucrative, but later ended up costing her greatly. The 25-year-old police officer made the cover of the Playboy magazine with the title NYPD Nude. On the cover, Shea was posing in a rather sultry pose in her police garb. Her gun was holstered to her side and her shirt unbuttoned pretty much all the way down. Besides the large cutout of her on the cover, there were also pictures of her inside the magazine, which included her posing in the nude and in skimpy police uniforms. Her one-off side gig for the magazine did end up paying pretty well. She made $100,000 for her service, but soon incurred the wrath of her entire police department.
I think it demeans the office. I mean, she represents the police department and she...
An administrative trial was held against Shea's actions. She was charged with violating the department's regulations, with her actions being determined as detrimental to the department. The judge added that the Playboy feature she posed in was about sex with a New York City cop and recommended that she lose a month's pay and be put on probation for a year. But the police commissioner, William Bratton, was not on board with the idea at all. He vetoed the judge's recommendation, said that Shea was unfit to be on the police force, and proceeded to fire her from her position. In his statement on the incident, Bratton said, "The reputation of the New York Police Department is not for sale, and there's no room in our organization for anyone who would attempt to do so." The president of the Policewomen's Endowment Association supported the commissioner's decision. Shea argued that this job that she performed was done off-duty and that the department was violating her constitutional right to free expression.
My attitude, if you don't agree with what I've done, I'm sorry, but fortunately, I'm entitled to do what I want, and I'm entitled to my opinion, you're entitled to yours.
She took her case to court, but in 1996, the court turned down her suit. Playboy spokeswoman Diane Stefani also had her say about Bratton's decision. She thought that his judgment of Shea's actions might be a reflection of his personal feelings. "We believe looking at pictures of beautiful women nude is a good and positive thing," Diane said, "but many of us are frightened by the human body unclothed." Shea, a 4-year veteran of the police, expressed her desire to still continue on after the incident. She felt her dismissal was unwarranted. "I definitely went through a period of being depressed," she said, "then through my angry state." After her termination, Shea pursued a career in the acting business. She bagged a few roles starring in a film named Silent Prey. She also made appearances on TV, in New York Undercover, and in an off-Broadway play, Grandma Sylvia's Funeral. But she grew tired of the acting industry and proceeded to pursue a career in real estate. "I'll keep doing my real estate," she said, "and if something happens in acting, fine." Number 2. Flipping a coin. Having a cop pull you over on the street is never a good sign. You can never tell what's going through the officer's mind, and there's always a chance to get arrested for the smallest of violations. That is exactly what happened in Roswell, Georgia, when 2 female cops used a coin toss app to determine the fate of a woman they stopped for driving too fast. Courtney Brown and Christy Wilson were stationed on traffic duty when a speeding driver flew past them. The driver's name was Sarah Webb. The officers began pursuing Webb and finally managed to flag her down. Officer Brown approached the vehicle and reprimanded Sarah for driving recklessly on a track that was still wet from the rain. Sarah tried to explain that she was getting late for her job at a hair salon, but Brown was not having it. She then asked for Webb's driver's license, told her to wait in the car, and walked to her police vehicle. This is when the story gets shady. In the conversation that we heard from Brown's body cam, her radar gun wasn't working. She was merely eyeballing Webb's speed. Not only that, but the officer was also unable to run a check on Webb's license. As Brown calls for backup, she and Wilson start discussing what their next course of action should be. Both of them can be heard talking about arresting Webb for reckless driving at first, but on Wilson's suggestion, both the officers decided to leave the woman's fate up to a coin flip app. On the body cam, Wilson was heard saying,
"Who's that? A head or tail?" Okay.
But despite the outcome of the toss, the first officer still goes 23, which is the Roswell Police Code for arresting someone. The two officers then decide to charge and arrest Webb for driving too fast for the conditions and reckless driving. According to Brown, Webb was speeding past at over 80 miles per hour on a wet track that has a maximum speed cap of 45 miles per hour. After the video of the incident surfaced online, the Roswell Police Department started an internal investigation into the actions of the officers. Wilson and Brown were placed on administrative leave while the investigation was still underway. A few weeks later, both officers were fired for their unethical conduct in the arrest of Sarah Webb. The charges against Webb were later dropped. Roswell Police Chief Rusty Grant said he learned of the incident just before the July 4 holiday. This behavior is not indicative of the hard-working officers of the Roswell Police Department. He added, "I have much higher expectations of our police officers, and I am appalled that any law enforcement officer would trivialize the decision-making process of something as important as the arrest of a person." Roswell Mayor Lori Henry was appalled. "Like you, I am shocked and offended by their actions," responding to the incident, Henry wrote on Facebook. "I find the behavior of these two officers inexcusable and unprofessional. This type of behavior is not and should not be reflective of our police officers in Roswell who protect and serve our community every day." The city administrator, Gary Palmer, also had his say about the incident. He announced on Facebook that Roswell is conducting an investigation into the police department to look at bigger issues. "I am stunned by the lack of professionalism and compassion displayed by some of our officers," Palmer wrote. "Those who do not share these values and meet these community standards should be and will be removed from service." Number 3. Tiffany Lipkovich. Cops going corrupt and violating their codes of conduct is always pretty troubling. A few years ago, Highland Park police detective Tiffany Lipkovich breached the public trust and got caught distributing fentanyl-laced heroin. Lipkovich, age 40, and her 38-year-old co-conspirator Amber Bellamy of the Detroit Police Department partnered up to distribute controlled substances to potential buyers. This is a very clear violation of the police code. Complaints were filed against the two officers, and a probe into their business began. Federal agents heard and recorded multiple calls between Lipkovich and a confidential source talking about the drug transactions. In one of the phone calls, Lipkovich showed the confidential source pictures of the substances that she and her partner had. Bellamy was also heard explaining that one of the items was $80 a gram, while others were $100 per gram. Lipkovich asked the source how they were diluting, or in her words, cutting the drugs. The source answered fentanyl, a response that would not surprise Lipkovich in the slightest. She told the confidential source that Bellamy was going to be receiving a package of fentanyl from overseas. Later on, the source ended up buying 45 grams of a fentanyl and heroin mixture from Bellamy. The confidential source then met up with Lipkovich, who was still on duty and in uniform, and gave her $300 for helping facilitate the deal. This was enough evidence for the investigators to warrant an arrest for both Lipkovich and Bellamy. After being part of the department since 2011, Lipkovich now faces a 40-year prison sentence along with her crime partner, Bellamy, after both of them pleaded guilty to the charges against them. U.S. Attorney Eisen, along with acting special agent in charge of the FBI's Detroit division, John B. Howhurst, made a joint announcement about the case. "Drug trafficking and drug addiction have created a crisis in our communities, something our law enforcement partners know all too well," said Eisen. "It is an affront to the good men and women in law enforcement and to the communities that they serve for a sworn law enforcement officer to betray her oath in this manner. Instead of upholding her oath to protect and serve, this police officer endangered the community by conspiring to distribute a dangerous and deadly drug," Howhurst said. "The FBI will work with the local and federal partners to protect the community from those who seek to harm it. The FBI appreciates the Highland Park Police Department for their cooperation in this investigation." These were some of the female cops who got fired for their shocking crimes. If you want to watch more such videos, subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time.